I'm here with Ivonne Sanchez. Yvonne, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, it's a pleasure, and an honor. I there's a lot that I want to get to. But before we do, could you please briefly tell our audience who you are and what you do or did?
Okay, I am retired in New York City, FDNY, emergency response. My job then was body recovery and identification for the fire department. I was deployed down there for the entire duration of the recovery efforts, and I am now retired, so I can say anything with no repercussions.
And just to put a stamp on that, obviously you're referring to 9/11, Ground Zero, and
Correct.
the
Right.
recovery effort that followed.
Uh,
Excuse me. So yeah, dialing the clock back then, Yvonne. Can you describe the experience of getting the call about the World Trade Center? Where were you and what were you doing?
okay. Yes, I was working that day. My tour started at 7, so that means you have to be logged into the computer 911 system and ready to work. Straight up, we call it straight out the box. I get a 911 job of a fallen. I recognize the address. We used to go there all the time to lift them, never to transport them to the hospital or anything. This time, he was the reason why I have to tell you this, because this is the only reason, he is the only reason why Engine 52 and Ladder 52 are still alive and I'm alive. It's because this beautiful, kind, elderly man, very tall, stocky, 6 feet something. He was a promoter with something because all his walls were decorated with Muhammad Ali. I used to love going to his house. He lived in the Whitehall building, which is a very luxury building in Riverdale. When we got there, he had fallen and wedged himself between the wall and the toilet. And he obviously dislocated his hip. Excruciating pain. He was in his late 80s. So I said, we're going to take our time. And we had to cut the wall to get him out. So all that time, we didn't know what was going on in the world. And as soon as so we got him out. Fire had to use the fire saw and cut him out, the wall. We had to shut so it took a while. It took more than an hour. And afterwards, we put him in the ambulance and we go to Montreal, and then I see it in the waiting room, in the emergency room. And I thought it was a movie. I'm like, what movie is this? And people crying, hysterical, and all this other stuff. And the triage nurse said, plane. And so when I was there, another plane hit. And then by the time we got there, so both buildings were down by the time I got there. And when we got there, with all the smoke and the haze and screaming and the fire trucks and the emergency sirens and all that, they kept telling me we couldn't get to a certain point, which was Chelsea Piers. I don't know if you're familiar with New York. So Chelsea Piers, after that, we had to go on foot. But you couldn't tell the difference between the Henry Hudson, where it ended, where was the highway, because all of the gravel and the buildings and all that had pushed. So I couldn't see. So I was like, which way? Because I'm a lousy swimmer, fall into the Henry Hudson because we couldn't see anything. And they said, just keep going straight. And that's when that's when I got to there. So I wasn't there for the building collapse. We were there afterwards. And at that point, for the first couple of days, I don't know how many days it was a rescue operation. And then it became a recovery. And so I was there from when it was a rescue. And so it's a rescue scene and a crime scene. So fire and PD do not mesh well in big MCIs because one thing's their higher authority than the other. But when there's patients involved, fire department is the higher authority and then PD. But, that was another posturing, like who department had all that. We'll get to that. So we were using the American Express building as a makeshift morgue. So ask me a question after that. So the building's collapsed, and now all we're doing is at one point is fire, trying to put down control the fire, and we were recovering anybody, you know, and transporting them out. You know, the train, number one train stopped because obviously it was under the World Trade Center. So and then they were closing the bridges because they didn't know if there were more terrorists and there. So the bridges were all being closed, and they were, you know, doing point checks and all this other stuff. So a lot of people were going one way when we're going this way. A lot of New Yorkers, visitors, whatever, they were jumping into the river to get away from that. So that was a large maritime recovery effort where now like the Circle Line and all that were now helping recover all these people that were displaced and couldn't get out. I don't know if you saw the pictures of them walking on the bridge, Brooklyn Bridge. I remember one person, he was a sanitation guy. I don't know what happened to it, but I remember at Columbia Presbyterian, 168th Street, hearing that this custodian, he heard, and this is how I know Latins will survive the apocalypse, because we're like roaches. You see something, they run. He said that they kept telling over the announcement speakers to go back to your office, that everything was under control. He was like on the 90-something floor, and he said he just ran and ran and ran, and he eventually made it to Columbia Presbyterian. He lost his shoes from running. He said they kept saying for us to stay, and he said he just ran and just kept going, and he eventually got treated for like lacerations and stuff at Columbia Presbyterian. Because, you know, the people were in the announcement speakers, they were saying that nothing was going to happen, and that to go back to your office instead of evacuating. And then we were having triage, for trying to understand. Triage was in the lobby of the World Trade Center. Now, if you have a plane hit, why are you doing triage in the lobby? Do you understand? Yeah. So there was a lot of stuff that happened. I think because we never expected something like that, we were unprepared, but it will never happen again, because they go through so much now to prepare for an event like this, that it's going to run, you know, hopefully never happens, but we are definitely prepared for something like that to happen now.
Yeah, absolutely, Ivonne. One question I was kind of occurring to me as you were talking, it might be a dumb question, but give it my best shot. Were you afraid as you arrived to the scene?
I thought we were at war. Now, I'm multiple generation Marine Corps, military, they've been in every, and because we had the repeater, the antenna up on tower, I think it's 1, 2, I don't know which one it was. It went down, so we lost all communication. We went back to regular writing on a card and going and passing it and doing it to the dispatch. So nobody knew what was going on. My cell phone didn't work. There was no landlines because everything fell. And so we were just getting communication from higher bosses. We didn't know how many this, that. And so at that time, I said, well, we're at war. You know, I couldn't reach my brother who works for the Department of Defense. We couldn't do anything. So for the first, I was down there the first 2 days, 48 hours. Now, this is the way I think. When the buildings collapsed, I said, what the, you know, F. And I go, we're going to get blamed for this. We broke it. We're going to get blamed for this. And immediately I said, well, once I finish with this, I'm going to get my bug out bag. I had 2 girls in elementary school, and they're going to be bullied. We're going to be cast as the worst department in the history of the universe, because these buildings came down and we couldn't stop the fire department. And so I'm going to get my bug out bags, and we're just going to go. I probably go to my other family in other countries, or go wherever. I thought my career was over. I'm going to remove my kids because everybody's just going to blame them, that, you know, that look what your mom did and stuff like that. And that was totally the opposite. 48 hours later, they had MTA buses to bring us back to our stations, right? Because we didn't have any vehicles there because everything was being used. I don't know how they knew that we were coming up the West Side Highway. It still brings chills. There were candlelight visuals. and singing Ave Maria. And here I am thinking, doom and gloom, we're going to have to get run, whatever. And here, past Chelsea Piers, lining up the Henry Hudson with these camo-eyed visuals with signs saying thank you. Look, it brings, I mean, I was like, and then right there I said, okay, we don't have to move. I don't have to quit my job. I'm a single mom. Because right now is immediately saving my children from being branded, associated with me, that, thousands of people died and the fire department failed in one way. But it wasn't, we couldn't control what happened.